The EPA signed a document in 2009 that allowed DuPont to begin manufacturing a new chemical. And in that same document, the agency acknowledged the chemical could cause cancer. The chemical is called GenX, and for over 4 decades, it has been going into the drinking water of hundreds of thousands of people in North Carolina. Some of those people knew about it. Most of them did not. A number of them are sick. This is the story of what happened along the Cape Fear River, and why the answer to how we got here is far more unsettling than the contamination itself. There is a 2,000-acre industrial facility in Bladen County, North Carolina, called Fayetteville Works. It was founded in 1971 by E.I. DuPont de Nemours, the company that made Teflon, that made non-stick coatings the global standard, that spent decades becoming one of the most powerful chemical manufacturers in American history. When DuPont spun off a division in 2015, the new company was named Chemours. Chemours inherited the facility. It also inherited what had been going into the river for more than 30 years before the name change. The Cape Fear River runs from the Piedmont down through the coastal plain and empties into the Atlantic near Wilmington. About 80 miles of it flows downstream of Fayetteville Works. The water utility for Wilmington draws its drinking water from that river. So does a chain of smaller utilities and private wells across 5 counties: New Hanover, Bladen, Brunswick, Cumberland, and Pender. According to the class action lawsuit certified by a federal judge in 2023, the combined population dependent on that water system is over 770,000 people. What those people were drinking, without knowing it, was water containing per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, PFASs, including a compound trademarked as GenX. PFASs are called forever chemicals because the carbon-fluorine bond at their core is essentially indestructible under normal environmental conditions. They do not break down in water. They accumulate in soil. In the human body, they accumulate in blood, in the liver, in the kidneys. They have been detected in the umbilical cord blood of newborns. They have been found in polar bears in the Norwegian Arctic. They have been detected in sediment at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. And they had been going into the Cape Fear River since at least 1980. Not from a single accident, not from a breach or an incident someone could point to and call an emergency, but as a continuous, documented byproduct of manufacturing, released through permitted water waste discharge, through air emissions that fell back to Earth and contaminated soil and groundwater for miles in every direction, through industrial seeps that migrated slowly but continuously toward the river. When the contamination finally became public knowledge in 2017, the water utility for Wilmington confirmed it had no ability to filter these chemicals from the drinking water it was delivering. There was no emergency treatment process. There was no public notification. There was no alert. For more than 40 years, the water just flowed. This is the part that Rob Billett understands better than almost anyone alive. Billett is the attorney who, in 1998, began investigating a chemical called PFOA on behalf of a West Virginia farmer whose cattle were dying near a DuPont facility. In the course of that investigation, Billett obtained more than 100,000 pages of internal company documents through a court order. What those documents revealed was that DuPont had been monitoring PFOA's health risks since at least 1984. The company had sampled public drinking water supplies in Ohio and West Virginia, confirmed the chemical was entering people's drinking water, and disclosed nothing. Not to regulators, not to local governments, not to the communities downstream. PFOA has since been linked to kidney cancer, testicular cancer, liver disease, and immune system disruption. By the time the EPA fined DuPont $10.5 million, the largest environmental penalty in the agency's history at that point, 80,000 people near Parkersburg, West Virginia, had been drinking contaminated water for decades. Bilott eventually secured a $671 million settlement for those victims. Hundreds of individual cancer cases followed. The total recoveries against DuPont from Bilott's class members have now exceeded $850 million. But that case is not the one we are talking about tonight. Under regulatory pressure to phase out PFOA, DuPont developed a replacement compound. That replacement was GenX. And in 2009, the EPA signed a consent order allowing DuPont to begin manufacturing GenX at Fayetteville Works. The consent order stated explicitly that GenX could present the same risks as PFOA, including cancer, systemic toxicity, and reproductive toxicity. The EPA signed it. Production began at the North Carolina facility. The discharges into the Cape Fear River continued under a new name. DuPont's own internal studies submitted to the EPA between 2006 and 2013 showed that GenX caused liver and kidney damage in laboratory animals, developmental effects including early deliveries, immune suppression, and cancerous tumors in both the liver and pancreas. The data existed inside the agency before the permits were issued. For the next 8 years, the residents of Wilmington turned on their taps and filled their glasses and made coffee and gave it to their children and never knew what was in it. If you live anywhere in the Carolinas or anywhere downstream of a facility you've never heard of, drop your location in the comments. I genuinely want to know where this video is finding people.
And here is the question I want to sit with you for a moment. The EPA received DuPont's own animal studies showing cancerous tumors and then signed the 2009 consent order acknowledging GenX could cause the same harms as PFOA anyway. Do you think that was a failure of the regulatory system or something more deliberate? Tell me what you think below. It was a journalist, not a federal agency, who finally told Wilmington what was in its water.
In June 2017, reporters at the Wilmington Star-News published a story revealing that a chemical called GenX had been detected in the Cape Fear River. The source was Fayetteville Works. The detection had been identified the previous year by researchers at NC State University working in collaboration with the EPA, but it had not reached the public as news. The Star-News story changed that. Cape Fear River Watch filed suit against Chemours under the Clean Water Act and against the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality for failing to act. The DEQ filed its own suit against Chemours. 3 separate legal actions were eventually consolidated into a consent order signed in February 2019, requiring Chemours to dramatically reduce PFAS discharges and air emissions, test private wells for surrounding residents, and provide clean water alternatives to those whose wells exceeded 10 parts per trillion of GenX. Chemours then missed multiple deadlines. In March 2023, the company blew past the date required to complete a barrier wall designed to contain PFAS groundwater migration toward the river and received a regulatory extension. North Carolina's Department of Environmental Quality fined Chemours $500,000 for exceeding air emission limits and for operating a treatment system that continued to allow residual PFAS contamination to reach the river. Both penalties were related to violations of the consent order the company had agreed to 4 years earlier. At the same time, researchers discovered 11 previously unknown PFAS compounds in the Cape Fear River. Compounds with no existing analytical standards. Compounds that science could confirm were present, but could not yet fully characterize, because the test methods had not been calibrated for them. In the words of the researchers, unknown because the analytical method has not been calibrated for them. The number of distinct PFAS variants in the river was larger than anyone had realized. What each one does to a human body at long-term exposure was not yet fully established. The Chemours contamination footprint had extended through air emissions alone at least 28 miles from the Fayetteville Works smokestacks. PFAS had settled into the soil. It had reached private wells across a multi-county radius. Residents living near Hope Mills, 13 miles south of the plant, bought homes without being told about the contamination until the moment they sat down to sign closing papers, and even then only in passing. Get your water tested if you want. Chemours will pay for it. That is when people found out. There is a statistic embedded in the class action litigation filed against DuPont and Chemours on behalf of over 100,000 Cape Fear River residents. The 5 most affected counties, New Hanover, Bladen, Brunswick, Cumberland, and Pender, have among the highest concentrations of liver disease in the United States, according to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services documented that rates of liver cancer, pancreatic cancer, testicular cancer, and kidney cancer are higher in specific counties within that group than the state averages. DuPont's own internal studies showed that the compound those counties had been drinking caused cancerous tumors in laboratory animals. Researchers at Stockholm University published findings in Environment International in January 2018, concluding that GenX may be, by certain toxicological measures, even more harmful than the PFOA it was designed to replace. The data existed before most of those residents had ever heard the word GenX. A 20-year GenX exposure study was launched in 2017 to measure PFAS concentrations in the blood of Cape Fear River Basin residents and track health outcomes over time. Participants are still enrolling. The study is designed to run until 2037. In 2023, a federal judge certified 2 class action suits covering utility customers and private well owners near Fayetteville Works. The Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals unanimously declined Chemours' petition to block that certification. Rob Billett's name appears in those filings. The same attorney who spent more than 2 decades extracting suppressed DuPont documents from a West Virginia courtroom is now part of the legal architecture being built around the Cape Fear. What those suits will resolve and on what timeline is a separate and very long story. There is one thing left to say, and it is the reason this is not a story about the past. In 2025, the EPA under the Trump administration moved to roll back PFAS drinking water regulations. The agency delayed enforcement of the new federal maximum contaminant levels for PFOA and PFOS by 2 years, pushing compliance to 2031. Then, in September 2025, the EPA petitioned a federal appeals court to rescind the drinking water standards for several PFAS compounds, including GenX, standards that had been finalized in April 2024. The first legally enforceable federal limits on GenX in the drinking water of the United States, in effect for 18 months, now facing potential elimination through a government court filing. Simultaneously, Chemours announced its intention to expand operations at Fayetteville Works to increase PFAS manufacturing at the facility that has contaminated the Cape Fear River Basin since 1980. The company filed an air permit application with North Carolina DEQ. Regulators asked Chemours to show that increased production would not increase the atmospheric deposition of PFAS falling from the facility's smokestacks. The same airborne pathway through which GenX had already been documented 28 miles away in private wells and the soil beneath people's yards. The water coming out of Wilmington's taps has improved. Granulated activated carbon filters came online at the Sweeney Water Treatment Plant in 2022, required under the consent order and paid for through Chemours' obligations under it. Those filters are working. They are not working for the private wells that have not been connected to municipal systems. They are not reversing what has already been absorbed into the bodies of people who drank from the Cape Fear River for decades before anyone said anything. They are not yet calibrated for 11 compounds that science has only recently identified as existing. What Rob Billet said across years of interviews is that the pattern repeats. One chemical is exposed, a replacement is approved. The replacement turns out to carry the same risks. The regulatory cycle begins again. The communities downstream wait. He has watched that cycle run against DuPont's PFAS for 25 years. The cycle around GenX is younger. It is not finished. The Cape Fear River has been running through the taps of Wilmington for over 4 decades, carrying compounds that were documented to cause cancer in laboratory animals before most of the people drinking them had ever heard the chemicals' names. The exposure study will run until 2037. The cancer data from the affected counties already exists. 20 years from now, researchers will publish what they found.